Okay. Hi everyone, it's Kino here. Welcome to day 20 of the yoga challenge. Congratulations for practicing for nearly 3 weeks. This is really, really awesome. And hey, don't worry if you're just finding the challenge right now or just interested in joining. You can jump into this challenge at any time. This is the perfect time to get on the mat and begin your practice. You don't need to be strong or flexible or naturally good at yoga to begin the practice. All you really need is, well, to start. There are so many people that think that you need to be naturally strong or naturally flexible or a particular age or size or shape in order to practice yoga and benefit from the practice. But this, in fact, is untrue. Anybody can practice yoga, and everybody who practices can really get the deeper benefits as long as, oh, sorry, as long as as long as your heart and mind are really aligned with the deeper kind of spiritual journey of the practice. That's really what is the essence of what makes a person qualified to start the yoga practice. Well, if you think about it, here we are. And now yoga is readily available in videos like this. And what we have to remember is that yoga comes from a spiritual tradition. This spiritual tradition has its roots in ancient India. And the ancient sages, rishis, yogis, meditators, spiritual seekers of times past were interested in the answers to some of life's most deepest questions. The ancient seers and seekers from the past were always interested in the spiritual journey. So what is the spiritual journey about? Well, usually it comes from the recognition that there are kind of disturbances and imbalances in the quality of mind, and there's a quest for lasting happiness and true peace. And I would say that anybody that comes to the practice of yoga with that on the heart, a desire for more peace, more health in the body, more peace in the mind, more openness in the heart, the questions of what it means to be truly happy and to find lasting happiness, to find true peace, lasting peace, that anybody who comes with that is really qualified to practice yoga. You don't need to be naturally strong. You never need to actually succeed at any of the poses in order to take those lessons that you can learn on your mat and apply them into your life. Well, I know that so many people are really intimidated by yoga. I mean, here I am sitting in what's called Padmasana or lotus position. And you may look at that and feel like, gosh, that'll never be me. I'll never fold my legs like that. I don't even understand how to do it. Or you may feel like, I'm just not really qualified. I don't really know what it means to be peaceful. So what you have to understand is that first of all, the desire for peace means that you recognize, okay, I'm not there yet. And that sort of openness is the humility to be a student on the spiritual journey. Then the second thing is that you start off with obstacles. We all do. And it's those obstacles that really have the biggest opportunity to teach us in the spiritual journey. And then the last thing that you want to understand is that, I've been practicing for more than 20 years. So if you see any yoga asana demonstrations, or if you listen to any meditations or talks that I give, please bear in mind I'm doing it for a really long time. I wasn't naturally good at yoga, and I'm not naturally calm or peaceful in my mind. In fact, I'm naturally kind of, I would say anxious, maybe impatient, and somewhat irritated at the world. It's a little embarrassing. But through many years of practice, I've gotten a little bit more peaceful. And I know that if you start practicing, that you'll be able to find definitely more peace than what you experience in your life right now. And more, definitely more health in the body. So the theme of the yoga challenge today is equanimity, the equanimous mind. So in addition to practicing yoga for over 20 years, I've also been meditating for about that long time as well. One of the key concepts in meditation is called equanimity, or in Sanskrit, upekshanam. And this concept of equanimity, the equanimous mind, is a really important tool to keep in kind of your spiritual toolbox. It's a key that can unlock so much more in your spiritual journey. And I didn't understand what it meant to be equanimous when I first started practicing. In fact, equanimity sounds kind of, well, really boring. It sounds like, well, what about all my preferences? Aren't I going to be like really passionate about this and really, devoted about this and kind of, what about all that? So the teaching of the equanimous mind kind of says that as soon as the mind is disturbed, you're actually not able to think clearly. So as soon as you notice your mind is disturbed, imbalanced, the teaching on equanimity says to wait until the mind has retained its balance before taking action, number one. Number two, there is a training in equanimity that actually helps your mind become trained to be equanimous. So let's take a look at what it actually means to be equanimous. Equanimity, coming from the word, equal, means to not have a preference for one way or the other, to not be disturbed from anything. So normally, human life is dictated by attachment to pleasure and aversion from pain. We spend our lives running from pain and running towards pleasure. Things which we find annoying, we have resistance and reaction towards. Things which we find pleasurable, we have a clinging and an attachment that's generated towards. The equanimous mind practices softening those kind of what's called samskaras, those behavioral patterns that hanker towards pleasure and run away from pain. This clinging and pushing away, which creates the illusion of I and mine, the illusion of ego, which is very much a source of suffering. So in other words, you don't need to be equanimous in order to practice equanimity. In fact, the more non-equanimous you are, probably the more you'll benefit from equanimity. I do a style of meditation called Vipassana, and the first 10-day retreat that I did, which was a totally silent retreat where we only meditated for 10 days, when I started meditating and sitting there after about 4 days, some really intense emotions came up. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I have suffered from sort of cyclical periods of depression since I was a little girl. And it went undiagnosed for many, many years. And the first time that I can look back and see was around the time I'm 8 or 9 years old. And when I was sitting in the Vipassana, the depressive state really, really came up around the 4th day, and tears started to roll, and the emotions were just really, really big, and they seemed to drown me for a moment, and I felt like all of those old kind of what you could call maybe demons kind of came back. Definitely those shadow side of the mind came back really, really strongly. And I spoke to the meditation teacher about it, and the teaching I got was the teaching of equanimity, which was you're going to do something which you've never done before in your life, and that is to simply watch your emotions, observe them, and not react to them. So when sadness is present, you're going to observe sadness is present. And you're not going to react to it or go into it with too much of a crazy, need to figure out where's it coming from. And you're also not going to fuel the fire. If tears come, just observe that tears are falling down your face, but don't kind of milk it, Sorry, I've got something in my throat there. Well, when I did that, I was doubtful at first that it would make a difference. I always felt before that, when I was sad, that I needed to give it importance, and I would, cry and kind of elevate the importance of my own emotionality, whether it was sadness or anger, anxiety. Those emotions seemed really, really big, and I always felt like I need to get to the bottom of it and figure out why I was sad and before I could let it go. But the teaching of equanimity is just pure observation. So I sat there and observed sadness is present. Tears rolled down my face, and I observed tears, the sensation of the wetness of the tears rolling down my face. Sadness is present. And I got into the texture and the feeling of sadness as a felt kind of embodied emotion. And I sat with it for a period of time, which was actually a few hours. And then it passed. It shifted. And that was that. I mean, it came back again and then it goes again. It's what I learned from the teaching of equanimity is that emotions are very much like weather. They come and then they go. They arise and they pass. And you can either choose to remain equanimous and observe the emotions as they arise, or you can kind of feed the emotions and go into a whole cycle that's driven by your own reactivity. Unfortunately, if you do that, what you think it of as intelligent action, as long as you are under an emotional hijack, is very much driven by fear and driven by past hurt and pain. So instead of breaking free of the cycle, if you act from a place of emotional or mental disturbance, you end up fueling the cycle. So the teaching of the equanimous mind is a way to break the cycle of addictive emotionality. And it's extremely helpful, but like anything else, requires so much practice. So one of the best ways to practice equanimity is meditation, to give the mind an anchor to rest on, such as the breath, and then to practice remaining equanimous and not having any sort of value judgment on whatever arises. So if your breath is deep, you observe breath is deep. If your breath is short, you observe breath is short and shallow. You practice remaining equanimous to the neutral object of the breath, and then whatever else arises as you try to bring your attention to the breath, you practice remaining equanimous towards that too. So if your feet fall asleep, you observe my feet have fallen asleep, and then you come back to the breath. And if you have really strong emotions that come up, frustration, irritation, anger, you observe. Frustration is present, and then you click right on back to the breath. All right? Okay. What do you say if for today's practice, we have a few moments of mindfulness where we practice remaining equanimous? If you want to do the yoga practice with me today, remember that's on omstars.com, and you can also practice equanimity there too. So come to a comfortable seated position, whether, lotus position or something else. It's totally up to you. You could even do this lying down if sitting isn't comfortable. If you can't sit on the floor, you're welcome to sit in a chair as well. So find your comfortable seated position. Allow your eyes to close. And bring your attention to your breath. To give the mind a more specific focal point, you might notice the breath inside the nostrils, along the upper lip, around the rim of the nostrils, and inside the nose. Feel the breath and be very aware. The simple awareness. I am breathing in as I breathe in. I am breathing out as I breathe out. In, out. Then begin to notice the qualities of the breath, cultivating the state of equanimity. If the breath is deep, observe breath is deep, but don't do anything to try to control or manipulate the breath to make it any way that you might prefer. If your breath is shallow, just observe my breath is shallow. If the breath is warm or cool, just observe breath is warm or cool. And if other thoughts arise as you try to bring your attention to the breath, well, remain equanimous and observe that too. For example, you might notice, my mind has gone away. Come back to the breath. You may notice, my feet have fallen asleep. Come back to the breath. You may notice, irritation has arisen. Come back to the breath. Break the cycle and inertia from the past and choose equanimity. The simple awareness of the inflowing and outgoing breath. Practice equanimity. Pure awareness. Let the mind be perfectly balanced, like a mirror, reflecting the true nature of reality as it is, free from value judgments, free from preferences, just the simple unfolding of the experience of the breath. In as you breathe in, out as you breathe out. In, out, over and over again. Whatever you experience, remain equanimous. It is the state of equanimity that you're cultivating, using the object of the breath as a resting point of mindful awareness. Then make a note on the level of your own mindfulness, your own equanimity, and notice. It was easy for me to remain equanimous, or equanimity is hard for me. Just take a mental note of that as a beginning point for your journey into the equanimous mind. Then allow yourself a deeper breath. And as you exhale, open the eyes. You could soften your posture now if you want. So one thing that's extremely important to think about with equanimity is that, emotional, highly reactive states cloud clear thinking. So at the very least, if you find yourself in the throes of what you could call an emotional hijack, you're feeling irritated, angry, you're feeling really, really sad, depressed, anxious, unhappy, you know that in those states you're not thinking clearly. So at the very least, you could take a few moments to practice equanimity so that you don't fuel the fire of past reactivity. And in that way, you can be just a little bit more free, both on the mat and also in your everyday life. Equanimity is a road that leads to real peace and lasting happiness, instead of the transitory happiness that comes from the enjoyment of the world of senses, which inevitably shifts and changes. The equanimous mind opens up the possibility of real spirit-based joy. I hope each of you find the seeds of true spiritual practice in your heart, and that those open and flourish and bear the fruits of equanimity, of peace, of joy, and ultimately of love. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Remember, you can join the challenge at any time on omstars.com. You get a free month of practice with full-length yoga practice, which you can watch commercial-free. And you get a month access to our over 2,000 class library, where there's a bunch of meditation videos, yoga videos by me. If you made it all the way through on this video, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Leave me a comment below and let me know how it's going. I love to see that you're active and engaged in the challenge, and also in your practice, applying the lessons of the yoga journey into your life. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Namaste.